Welcome back to another episode of Cold Red. I'm Ray Carr, and with me always is Fitz. Fitz, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you, Ray?
Good. We have a guest today. It's his second time back, Bill Fleisher. Bill has an extensive career in law enforcement, working within multiple agencies, and now is considered one of the foremost experts in polygraph training. Bill is also the Commissioner Emeritus of the VDOC Society, an organization both Jim and myself are members of as well. Bill, welcome back to Cold Red. It's great to have you back on another show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be back.
And audience listening and watching, if you didn't see the episode right before this one, you may want to check that out. You learn a lot about Bill and his background growing up in Philly cop, FBI agent, customs, and really a really extensive career there. Retiring from that world in 1996, and we're going to pick up on that shortly. But Bill, in the prior episode, you mentioned you started your polygraph training with the FBI, and it seems like you completed it with customs. And you can listen to the prior episode to everyone to figure that out. But what is a polygraph? We know it's a lie detector machine, people will say, but I know it's more than that. How does it work? How many tests did you give? Are there some tests that you remember better than others? Walk us through it a little bit.
Well, polygraph is Greek for many writings. It started out as in the late 1800s, in 1895, there was a big increase in the interest of criminalistics. This was the era of Sherlock Holmes. This was the era of fingerprints starting to develop. People were very interested in scientific methods and for law enforcement, for forensics. And lie detection has been something that's been around since ancient times. The Chinese used to use an idea of they'd have a certain crime in the town or the village, and they would have all the suspects stand around, and they would have them, it's about 900 BC, they'd have them take up some dry rice and then spit it out. Well, the people that were telling the truth could spit it out because they had moisture in their mouth. They didn't have the inhibition of their salivary glands when a person's afraid of being detected in this case. And the guy who committed the crime, he would have rice, he couldn't spit it out. It's sticking to the inside of his mouth. And even today, that was one of the first tests that they used that involved physiology and psychology. And polygraph is the art of detecting deception using the sciences of psychology and physiology. And as things started to evolve, people would start testing breathing, changes in breathing, respiration, indicative of deception, heart rate, blood volume changes. They had blood pressure cuff. And then they started using the galvanic skin response that would measure the conductivity in the human body under fear. Now, people don't know this, but the human body is electrical organ. The nervous system is electrical. And the brain the body can produce at any time 12 to 24 watts of energy. So if you're afraid, you're in that we call the fight-flight mode. You're in fear of being detected telling a lie. Your brain's firing. You're trying to stay calm, but your body is gearing up to meet the threat. Well, these scientists over the years, some of them were legitimate scientists. Some of them were just police officers that wanted to, law enforcement, wanted to figure out a way to tell if somebody's lying using an instrument. And over the years, they developed technique, developed instrumentation that was very sensitive. And they would, by analyzing the data that was produced on these instruments, the charts, they could see their physiological change when a certain question was asked. And an expert, he's designed to analyze those charts, to collect them and analyze them. It would be, the metaphor would be reading an X-ray. And sometimes I've seen it when these swallowers I had talked to you about in the previous episode, they would take an X-ray And I saw two doctors, radiologists, say, is that condoms? Is that the pellets? Or are that just gas bubbles? And they would, by their experience, they would decide what they're looking at. That's what we do in Polygraph. We have a crime, or we're doing screening testing. We look for areas that pose a threat to the individual, and then we discuss it with them.
I have to say this to you, and tell me if this relates to polygraphy. I remember I was in Buffalo in the late 80s, and one of the guys brought a guy in, and we had a new copy machine. And someone put a piece of paper in a copy machine. We were asking questions of this guy, and he says, I think you're lying to me. The guy says, I swear I'm telling you the truth. He says, put your hand on this machine over here. He goes, well, what is it? He goes, it's a polygraph machine. He goes, what's that? He goes, it tells if you're lying or telling the truth. So he puts his hand on it. He pressed the button, and the paper came out and said lying. And the guy goes, I'm sorry. He goes, I'll tell you the truth. And we wound up getting a confession from the guy. Is that polygraphy?
I've heard that. That's psychological. I put that in the area of voice stress. Voice stress. All the studies have shown it to be a coin flip. No accuracy whatsoever. But the subject believes that he's lying. First of all, you got to classify. Most people, every day they tell lies. How you feel? I feel great. How's the job? Oh, I love it. Just normal. Most of all, you get that tie from your Aunt Sadie. And say, well, how'd you like the tie I gave you for your birthday? It's beautiful. The polka dots and the stripes go perfectly with my orange suit, That's called manners. That's how we don't kill each other. We get along with each other. The people that we deal with, if it's a serious enough crime, they want to tell the truth. The natural instinct is, I killed Johnny. What are you going to do about it? But they know the rest of society doesn't agree with that. Right. And they have a lot of this internal tension and stress that can be displayed on a polygraph. Let me tell you what a polygraph is. A polygraph's like a scalpel. It's like a violin. It's an instrument. It's in whose hands is the scalpel in? I heard a story once. They removed a wart off a woman's nose, put her in a coma for 2 years. Another guy will bring you back from death's door, save your life, and rebuild you. A violinist, everybody heard Jack Benny, and then you get a guy like Itzhak Perlman or Yasha Heifetz, and they can make the violin speak. Well, polygraphs like that. There's some people that can read charts, and some people you can hit them over the head with the charts. They just can't see it. They don't understand it. The light bulb never went on in training. So what do you need? You need good training on anything, any skill, whether it's firearms, whether it's being a teacher, professor, being a profiler. Jim, you got to have good training how to do it. Then you have to have experience doing it. We don't learn by things we do right, because you can do something 100 times correctly by accident. You make one mistake, you learn. That's where these doctors learn. They bury their mistakes, right? They learn not to make that mistake again. Well, how many times have you conducted polygraph tests? How many? And then there's one other important element. In anything, in any profession, any career, any skill, you have to have a talent for it, a natural talent for it. You just can't, anybody, I won't say any moron because it's not true, but anybody can make charts, collect charts. It's being able to interpret it. It's be able to establish rapport with your subject. It's be able to use what you have in front of you to convince this person he has to make statements against his own interest and confess without hitting him over the head with the polygraph instrument. That's where the talent comes in. People say how accurate it is. Well, it depends what you're asking. If the issue is, did you steal that deposit, maybe it's 85, 90% accurate. Did you shoot Johnny, maybe it's 95, 98% accurate. Well, they said, it's not admitted in court. That's another myth. 22 states have admitted it over objection. Usually it's with a stipulation both sides agree to it. The military uses it all the time, and they're very good at it because they're well trained. But there'll be some people that just don't get it. We've all worked with policemen, agents, people that nice guys, they just don't know it. They don't understand what their job is, how to do it right. That's the way of the world.
Law enforcement uses it too, Bill. I mean, that's how we hire. That's how we hire police officers, agents, and there's people that have tried to get on the job and were not able to get on the job because of the polygraph not being able to successfully pass the polygraph. So it carries a lot of weight.
Let me tell you why 3 reasons somebody will flunk a polygraph test. They did the crime. 1 reason. 2, they didn't do it, but they know who did it. And maybe the stitches get stitches. Maybe they want to get involved, or whatever the reason. They're reacting because they know what really happened. And the 3rd reason is called transference. Transference, and we've had cases. Let's say you work in a bank, you're teller. In the private practice, I've been retired since '96. We used to have bank clients. They have a missing deposit. We had one. I'm watching my partner, Nate Gordon, is one of the top examiners in the world. And he's testing this guy, and I'm watching it from our little room that we can watch. And I said, this guy didn't do it, but I'm watching the charts. The charts are deceptive because we can see the charts on a screen. So Nate comes out and he comes in and talks to me. I said, Nate, I don't think this guy did it. He said, I don't either. I said, let me go talk to him. Okay. So I go in and I said, look, there's 3 reasons you'd have problems with your test. A, you took that deposit that's missing. B, you know who took it, and you don't want to say anything. You don't want to be a snitch. And 3, you didn't take that deposit, but you've done something so similar that when you hear, did you take, you're thinking about that. Let me ask you a question, I said. What happens? You ever have an occasion where your till is $20 over your bank? Yeah. What do? Well, we take that $20 and we have a sunshine fund. And we put it in there. If the next day Mrs. Jones comes in and says, oh, I was $20 short, we just give it to her. She comes in every day, it's a different story, but we give it to her. I said, you ever be over in your drawer and you say, we're going out drinking with the guys or something, you put it in your pocket with the intent to pay it back and then forget about it? Yes. Tell me about it. And we find out he's done it on several occasions. He did not take that. He did. Once he gets that off his chest, his charts will clear up after taking that missing deposit. So it's the skill of the examiner.
Yeah, it is.
And the pre-interview is important. The post-interview is important.
Yeah.
And they're all, you can correct me here. I know there's some different peak of tension tests,
yes.
But basically you're always asking yes and no questions.
Yeah, they got to be dichotomous, either yes or no.
Or binary, as they would say today.
Binary, these fancy people.
And the early questions are questions you know the answers to.
Yes.
What's your name? Of course, some people can lie about their name, but it's, how old are you?
You wouldn't use that. You used to use where you're born in the United States. Well, if you have an immigration case, that becomes a relevant question. So you have to know what technique to use.
Mm-hmm.
A peak of tension test is sort of asking a bunch of questions, and one key, if you know the answer, that key is somewhere in the middle of it, and you see if he reacts it. Only the doer would know that key, the type of weapon that was used, let's say.
Well, think of the clue game, and somehow someone in real life, of course, is murdered, and nowhere in the media has it come out how the person was killed, what kind of weapon. So I'm trying to simplify it for the audience, Bill. You would set this up perhaps differently, but in so many words, you're talking to the person. All right, Joe was killed by a rope, and you may have a flat line.
Right.
Joe was killed by a knife, flat line. Joe was killed by a wrench, flat line. Joe was killed by a gun, zips up and down, up and down, up and down. That's essentially how that part works, right?
Yes, that would be
tension.
And
And
no,
that's not
so
a yes or no question per se. It's just you're just putting the item out there.
you preface it like this. If you know for sure how Joe met his death, was it by poison? You know it's not poison. You use something, etc. And you can go down the list. Now, that is called the guilty knowledge test.
Oh, right.
It's the only test that one of the biggest anti-polygraph guys there is says is 100% accurate. Interesting.
Interesting, yeah.
But you asked about some interesting tests. Hey, once called me down to Florida. They caught a guy going out with $300,000 in cash in Miami. They knew it was drug money. The dog said it on it, things like that. And he says, oh, he doesn't know who gave it to him. He doesn't, someone asked him to take his bag, the usual story. Would you be willing to take a polygraph? He was under arrest. They arrested him for currency violations. So I come down there and I have it translated because he speaks Spanish as his first language. He spoke English as good as you and I, but you don't want to give him
Funny how that works, yeah.
you don't want to give him a rap. So he failed the test that he knew it was drug money, that thing. And he's in the room. I go out to the agent. I said, who do you suspect this money belongs to? He says, we think it belongs to this cartel. I said, you got a bunch of mugshots of these various suspects and all? He said, yeah. I'm going to run a test where I'm going to hold up the picture. You say, when I point to you, say, no, I don't know how you'd say it in Italian. In Italian, I'd say lo conosce. Do you know him?
La Cosa Nostra.
Do you know him? But they would say it in Spanish. I'm not sure how you say it in Spanish. And I'd hold up the pictures. And I had two that they knew couldn't possibly be the guys. They were dead. I hold up the picture as I asked I point to him. He asked the question. Bingo. He hit on the picture of the guy they had suspected, whose money it was. So that was an interesting case. I once did during George Bush's, when he was vice president, he had a South Florida drug initiative. I'm in headquarters. I get a call. Can you do a polygraph on a ship? I said, sure. Did they have electricity? Yeah, the electricity. We found 72 kilos of cocaine in Miami on a ship, the Nordic Prince. That was the name of the ship. We suspect some crew members. We didn't lock anybody up. We'd like you to come down and test the crew members that they suspect. So I go down there and I develop some sources, some solid sources, some suspects. The cabin, they kept the cleans the cabins. I'm losing it right now on what they call them.
Porters?
A little different than a porter, but anyway. So I had an agent with me who spoke Spanish, and he would interpret some of these people. They had crews from international crews. Well, the ship goes in. The ship is in one of the ports is St. Thomas. So I call ahead on the phone. Can we get the agent? And we had an agent, and we want to fingerprint some crew members. Okay. So they bring them on, and they fingerprint some crew members. Make a long story short, we headed out. We're going to next port is Haiti. So one of the ship's officers come to me and said, this guy, his name, I won't use his name, Joe Blow, jumped ship in Haiti. So another guy comes up to me, and he was like the head of the porters. He said, oh, so-and-so left the ship. I said, that's all right. We got the Tonton Macoute looking for him. Just before the ship, there was a secret police in Haiti. And, the very dangerous crew.
Yeah.
Under Papa Doc. Baby Doc was in charge at this point. Yeah. And sure enough, the ship was taken. The guy came back on the ship. They got word to him, better get back on the ship. Gets back on the ship. So I said, I want to interview him. The ship had sailed, and I said, I want to interview him. But before I interview him, I'm saying this to the captain. I said, I want to talk to your radio guy. Where they do ship-to-shore radio and all. And he takes me in the meeting. He says, I want this message. The ship's at sea now, a day or two. I said, I want the message from the SAC, from the resident agent, St. Thomas, to the SAC Miami.
Special agent in charge.
Yeah, to Special Agent Fleisher. Fingerprints submitted at St. Thomas compared to those found on the cocaine kilos, identical with Ern Gale. Okay. I said, as we're walking him up and I would do all the testing in the captain's sea cabins on the bridge. When he's at sea, it was storms. He had to be up there all the time, and he slept in that right off the bridge. I said, I'm gonna walk by you, by the radio room. I want you to say, Mr. Fleisher, I have a telegram for you, and you hand me this telegram. All right. So I go find this Ern Gale, and I said, all right, I want to see you again, talk to you again. When we're going by the radio room, Mr. Fleisher, we have a telegram for you. Thank you. And I stick it in my pocket like this, and I go up to the room. And this guy's sitting there like this. And I said, why'd you leave the ship? He said, well, my wife is pregnant. I wanted to call home and see how she was doing. From Costa Rica, how he's doing. I said, I think you said you never, let me ask you, in those suitcases that were in that cabin, vacant cabin, did you open them at any time, look inside? Says, no. Did you touch anything? No. I take the telegram out. I look at it, and I said, how do you explain this? And he looks at it, and he goes like this. He goes from here to here. I said, now you want to tell me what happened? He said he was approached when the ship was in Venezuela. He was approached to bring the suitcases on and watch them. And that's all he knew. Anybody else involved? Yeah, his boss, the head cabin. And anybody else? Yeah. So, all right. Now they put him, like the captain puts him in a jail. They have a certain ship has a jail. All these cruise ships have a cabin with like a jail. I guess if a guest goes crazy or something like that. He's in the jail. Next port is Miami. We go into Miami and we lock up the 3 people involved. And they were convicted by it anyway. But that was psychological. I didn't have a polygraph, but I had a chart.
Just as good.
And the Supreme Court has ruled that law enforcement can lie to people. I'm not sure in some states you can't do it to juveniles.
I think the law, if it doesn't shock the conscience of the court.
There you go.
Like you tell them your mother's dying, that would shock the conscience of the court.
Otherwise, we found your fingerprints on the stolen car,
Can you
whether you
explain
did
that?
or not. And he's all right, but you still need other evidence then to go on. Great story. You retire in 96, become private investigator, but there's a case of which you're aware, well known in the Philadelphia area, Boy in the Box, and somehow you're talking to other people and there's other unsolved crimes. Bill, walk us through the VDOC Society's birth and how you even came up with that name and who and what it represents.
1990, I had just came back from headquarters. I was in the deputy SAC. One of my close friends over the years was Frank Bender. Frank Bender was a famous as a forensic sculptor. His message on his phone is the recomposer of the decomposed. He would take his skull, Ben Salem up, he'd take these skulls, and I could tell you how he got into the practice, but let's just say he's very good. I had worked over the years with him on a couple fugitives. I happened to have had contact with, he worked on the John List one, Allie Boy Persico. Well, and he was telling me he's working for the marshals doing aging a bust of Allie Boy Persico. I said, I knew Allie Boy. So you did? I said, yeah, I arrested him. And I would tell him about him, and he would put that in his work. And then there was another guy, Hans Vorhauer, which is a story in itself, murdered a witness. When I was in Boston, I had the case, federal witness, and we were able to put him in Boston. He escaped from prison with Norse from the pagans or the warlocks who killed
State trooper, right?
killed
Right.
a young girl, his girlfriend, and hung her in a cabin in the Pinelands somewhere. Buried.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, we were very close, him and I. So one day he calls me. It was actually, I tell you exactly, it was on President's Day, 1990. I get a call like the Friday before. He says, Bill, a friend of mine's coming in town. I worked on the John List case, the fellow that killed all his family.
And was a fugitive.
Frank and he both did a lot of work with John Walsh on America's Most Wanted. And he said, his name's Richard Walter. He's in town. I want to have lunch with him. Can you come? We can meet. I said, all right. And we met at a place called Day by Day on 20th Street, the 20th and Sampson in Philadelphia. And we're talking. They're talking about the cases. Richard was a psychologist in a prison for about 10 years. I was sort of a profiler. And
Sort of.
Well, I never saw more like professional jealousy in profilers than the only place I saw more was in polygraph examiners. That guy's a bum. He couldn't call a chart if it bit him. I've seen that in profilers. But anyway, be that as it may, they're talking about the John List case. They're talking about another case. And we're talking before we're done. Well, lunch is over. It's almost 4:00. And I say, just serendipity, boy, that was fun. That was intellectually stimulating for me. I enjoyed it. We ought to get together on a regular basis, get a group together on a regular basis, forensic, and look at old cases and apply some of the modern forensic techniques. Like DNA was starting to come into its kind. Toxicology, different things that weren't thought of back in the day when some of these cases happened. That's a great idea. And I said, you guys think it's going to be, let's do lunch deal. We'll never hear the end of it. So I went back within my mind to get something started. And I was a big fan of this guy who I read, actually, the first time I saw his name when I was studying for the detectives test in Philadelphia. We had to study a book called Sodom and O'Connor, Modern Criminal Investigation. The first page of that book, they refer to the first detective, Jean-Francois VDOC, and that's his name. But then later I read his life story. And this guy was the basis of Sherlock Holmes, Murders of the Rue Morgue. Dickens used him. He was a very unique guy in the sense that he started as a criminal.
In France, right? Paris?
Yeah. He was the Willie Sutton of France. They'd lock him up, he'd escape. They'd lock him up, he'd escape. And they finally have him on the galleys, and he escapes. And he's living in Paris. In those days, there were no central record keeping. The gendarmerie wore uniforms. Only people that wore there were no detectives that wore plain clothes were the agents for the state looking for somebody trying to overthrow the government or something. So he's living in Paris in a shop with his mother and his mistress. And they sold fabric, things like that. That must have been interesting. With his mother and his mistress. And somebody that was he was escaped prison for about 10 years. They hadn't caught him. And somebody recognizes him, one of his former convicts. And they threatened to expose him unless he paid him money because he was successful in this little business he had. And he said to himself, he said, all right, I got on this hand, I got life imprisonment. And this hand, I got life of being extorted. So he sends a message to the prefect of police, a guy named Monsieur Henri. He said, I'm the great VDOC. Everybody's looking for me. I would like to meet you under a flag of truce, and I think I can help you in police work. So he was an honorable guy, this Henri, the prefect of police. He met with him. He says, look, nobody knows more about crime than me. I can help you solve cases. All I want is my pardon, my freedom. And this was in his book, his Memoirs of VDOC, written by himself. Some people say it's exaggerated or whatever. And he said, but you got to trust me. We had a very dastardly murder of a wealthy merchant, and we think we know who did it, but we have no evidence. And he's in jail now. You have to let us arrest you and put you in jail, and you get the information, the evidence that we could use. Now, VDOC trusted him. Also, he knew he could escape from any place, especially this particular jail. So he agrees to it. And he goes in there, and it's just like Bernie Madoff walked into prison. Everybody wants, all the criminals want to get next to him. All the criminals want to, and what does everybody want in life? They want approval from their parents, approval from their coworkers, their friends. And all the convicts want approval. So this guy was in jail for something else. He starts telling VDOC about this murder of this merchant. He said, the police are so dumb. There was a street porter. They never even interviewed it. They never talked to him. He saw me come out with blood on my hands, blah, blah, blah. And VDOC used to smuggle information out with his mistress. And they go and they find, he smuggles that information out. They get the street porter. They give a lineup. He identifies the guy. The guy gets the guillotine. And they let VDOC escape. And they set him up initially working as an informant. Then eventually they give him his pardon, and they let him establish the Bureau de Sûreté. That's the first time they had Sûreté, that we all know today, the Sûreté, the French Sûreté. And the regular police didn't like him. There was professional jealousy because he was solving all these cases. He was using this, some of his old cellmates as informants. And eventually, they started to accept him. He solved many cases. He was the first guy to use ballistics. He was the first guy to use plaster of Paris on footprints outside of a crime scene. He was the first person to centralize record keeping. In fact, the bureaus, when we were in there, and they used to, before computerization, they had index cards, indices, like they do in a library. He established indices in the French police. When Sir Robert Peel formed the police in Britain, London, the Metropolitan Police Force, they sent them over to see VDOC. Now, to frame a reference, VDOC was born in 1775. He died in 1857. He left the police and he started his own private investigation. He was the first guy to have a private investigation firm that was international. So that was VDOC. And I even read his life story and I said, boy, that'd be a great name for a group, the VDOC Society. And we could look at old cases and try to just solve them and using techniques and for mental excitation. Well, Frank Friel came. I wrote a letter, 26 people. Frank Friel, at the time was the superintendent of police in Bensalem, former Philadelphia homicide commander, U.S. attorneys. We have people such as yourself, profilers, professional investigators like Ray. 24 of the 26 people responded, and we set up bylaws. In fact, Kenny Freeman, you might remember Kenny, he was a Philadelphia cop with me, went to law school, Temple Law School at night, and then became an ADA for a while, and then went out on his own. He lived in Bensalem. That's where his office was. But anyway, he wrote up bylaws, and we started, but it was supposed to be social. We're just meeting for social. And we would meet once a month on third Thursdays, unless there was some conflict. And one day, Frank Friel goes out to Texas to speak in front of a group called Parents of Murdered Children. Now, this was about 91 or almost 92. And he came back. He said, Bill, there must have been 1,000 people in the room when I spoke and mentioned the VDOC Society. And afterwards, about 100 people came up, wanted us to look at their child's case. We got to get away from these esoteric cases like the Cleveland Torso murder, the murder of at the Natchez Trace of Meriwether Lewis. That was an old case, and look at more cases that we can help people. And that's how we went from pure social to looking at more recent cases, cold cases. Okay, that's how we established the VDOC Society, and this is our 35th year. All right, coming up, 35th year. Now, how did we get in The Boy in the Box? One of the friends I made over the years was Ron Avery. Ron Avery was a reporter for the Daily News, and he was an author. He wrote books on crime, different things of that nature. He comes in my office, my PI office, Locust Street, one day. He says, "Bill, you ever hear of a guy named Seymour Levin?" I said, "Sure, Seymour Levin. He chopped up his neighbor's a kid. He was just a kid himself, 18. He said, 'Come on, I'll show you my chemistry set. Get some murders and chops them up.' When I was growing up in Winfield, when I was growing up, Seymour Levin was the boogeyman for my generation. Watch out, Seymour Levin will get you." He said, "Well, I'm writing a book called Philadelphia City of Brotherly Mayhem. And one of the stories is on Seymour Levin. And I heard he just got out of prison and he's living with his sister in upstate Jersey, North Jersey. Can you find him for me?" I said, "I'll try. You know anything about him?" "Yeah." "You know his sister's name?" "Yeah." I spin around, get to my trusty databases, turn around, ask where he's living. I was able to find where he's living. And he said, "Do you ever hear of The Boy in the Box?" I said, "Hear of The Boy in the Box? I see his face right now when you mention it." When I was about 13 years old, my mother went to Penn Fruit Company on City Line Avenue, and I went with her. And she went in the store, and I'm looking in the window. There was a poster of a little boy sitting in a chair, was dead. One sunken, it was macabre. And he was found in Fox Chase, which I didn't know where Fox Chase was or what it was. And that face stuck with me over the years. I said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "Well, there's a detective, Tom Augustine. I'm going to write about The Boy in the Box." He was found in a box up in Susquehanna Avenue, up in the far northeast.
It's a second neighborhood of Philadelphia, kind of near the border with Bucks County. And
yes, very close to the border. And in 1957, and Tom Augustine's a detective in homicide, and he's starting the case again. He said that would be a good case for the VDOC Society to look at. I said, "Yeah, we're glad." So we arranged it. Tom gave a presentation, and it was agreed that at the end, he would get all the boxes of evidence, bring them to the VDOC offices, and we get a team together, including VDOCians, Joe McGillen, who was a medical examiner's detective at the time, Sam Weinstein, who was a 40 years detective. He was the third officer on the scene. Elmer Palmer was the first officer on the scene. And then he was driving the Captain Maurice Fleisher, same spelling, Maurice Fleisher. And he worked on the thing. So, and Bill Kelly was the boy, did the footprints of the boy and fingerprints. He was the fingerprint guy for the police department and went to every hospital trying to see if where that baby was born. Those pictures that I saw that stuck in my mind, were macabre pictures, went out to every hospital, every utility company, all over the country. And it was the most continually open homicide in Philadelphia. It was this unknown child. So we're working.
Bill, just to kind of remind some people, the boy was in some kind of a box. It was a cold winter day, I believe, February of 1957.
25th, 1957.
In this kind of secluded, it was still within the city limits of Philly. It was
a short dump, but it had not been developed back then. It was like almost a dirt road.
And a college kid was walking by. He saw it, went over, and the police were called. And this little boy, and he was relatively well preserved because of the cold weather.
And he was nude, wrapped in a blanket of an Indian type design, American Indian, Native American design.
And the best they could do to try to identify this kid, and they knew they had with the autopsy, I believe, blunt trauma.
Yeah, and they had some cut down scars that we later figured out what they were.
But to best identify this kid, and of course that's how you have to figure out who then would have killed him, who were his parents, or caregivers, whatever, they basically put a little makeup on them and
dressed them up in clothes donated by
dressed them up in
the
clothes,
detective.
sat them up,
Yes,
and took pictures of them.
exactly.
And it went all over the local news, the TV news, the front page of newspapers. Do you know this boy? And you said hospitals and utility workers.
Yeah.
And this went on for years.
Yes.
Continue.
Yes. So we have all the boxes. We had the 3 guys working on it. There's some theories. It might have been a carnival worker who had all kinds of different theories of who might have perpetrated this. Oddly enough, Frank, through his connections with John Walsh, got John Walsh to do a story on it.
America's Most Wanted.
Yes. And we did a story, and we started getting some good, what turned out, I thought, were good leads. And these agents would run them out. You know, when I say agents, the VDOC Society would run them out under Tom Augustine. And we sort of placed them through one of the original investigators thought it might have been a house nearby that was had foster kids. And we did everything. People would call up. We ran out every lead. But then we said, how about DNA? Tom, how about we exhumed him out? He was buried in Potter's Field. The only grave there with a stone that was donated by the police department. Detectives all chipped in to get him a stone. We dig him up, exhumed the body. Dig him is better, fancier word, and try to get some DNA. So the FBI response team that does these things showed up. We got a court order. Tom Augustine got a court order, but in the middle there, Sam and I were talking. And so, you know, let's get him out of Potter's Field. Let's get him someplace else. Yeah, we could do that, and that'd be a good thing. Sam was a real old time stealth detective, and he said, "Now we could call him America's Unknown Child." I said, "That's great. That's good, Sam." And he'd be a symbol of all children. So I call Augustine up, Thomas, who's now deceased. And he said, "Yeah, we could do that." I said, "Well, how do we get him moved to another place?" He said, "Call up Craig Mann." Craig Mann was a funeral director whose father, Henry Mann, had buried him pro bono originally. Tell him who you are and what we're doing. So I call up Craig Mann, and I introduce myself, and I said, "Look, we want to take this boy and reinter him in some nice cemetery somewhere. Get him out of Potter's Field. Can you find us a place?" Also, how do we do that? He said, "You got to have it in the order, the court order, that they can exhume him and reinter him." Whatever. He said, "I'll look for a spot for you." I get a call several hours later at my number. I found a perfect place for him. Ivy Hill Cemetery. It's beautiful. I spoke to the owners, the Drysdale family. They're going to donate a plot. They're going to give a plot right in the front. The front when you go in this beautiful stone gate. I said, "How much is that going to cost?" I got to go to the board to get. There's nothing. They're donating it. I said, "God bless them." And I said, he said, "And I'm burying him. I'll do the service pro bono." Geez, thanks, Craig. We became good friends, by the way, Craig, over the years. I said, "We need a stone that says something nice, or it's great, a tombstone. Find out how much you can get me a tombstone for." Calls me back. He said, "I got you a tombstone." I said, "How much is it?" "I got to run it by the board." He said, "Nothing. The Christopher brothers are donating it. They're the monument people." I said, "God bless them." I said, "But I'd like a stone bench there that people could come and meditate, but we're definitely paying for that," which we did. We put a nice stone bench. So anyway, we had a service. We reinterred them. They got some DNA. It was a poor sample because the bones were pretty well deteriorated all over these years. The Drysdale family, Mr. Drysdale, the father, was gone. Young Dave Drysdale, he would let us know if anybody came to visit that looked like they were interested, get a plate number. We'd run out every lead. And then the state police, the FBI, they were disinterring, exhuming various people around Potter's Field to get a project to see if they could identify him. And then they came to Ivy Hill, and they exhumed the boy and got a better sample right there. They had a little workman shed when I went there to see it. Very, very sad, but anyway, they got a better sample, but still wasn't good enough. So the sample, they sent it off to Max Planck Institute in Europe, I think in Lucerne, Switzerland. And they were able to develop a profile, homicide, for the homicide. And they got Colleen Fitzpatrick, who was a forensic genealogist, a member of VDOC. You both know her. Her and Missy Gillis, they were able to track to the DNA down to half siblings. And eventually they were able to find the birth certificate of the boy, and they revealed it back in January of 2 years ago, I think it was. Maybe 3.
It was around December of 22.
Yeah, something
22,
like
23.
So we wanted to put another tombstone up. So Howard Lebowski, who was the chairman of VDOC board, we go up there and talk to Dave Drysdale. He gets, I think it was Mark DeChristopher, one of the DeChristopher sons, to come over. And they worked out a beautiful stone, and they're going to put the name on the stone that's already there. And we had another ceremony on his birthday. And he was identified as Joseph Augustus Zarelli. Now, here's all the interesting points. One, they knew he came from the area of 63rd Market, in that area.
West Philadelphia.
West Philadelphia.
Diagonally, as far as you can get almost from
Yes.
Fox Chase.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
They knew the father's name, who was deceased, and the mother's name, who was deceased. The father, my mother and my grandparents and my uncle grew up at 60th and Race. Zarelli was at 63rd and Callowhill. A walking distance, a 3-minute walk to the father, I used to patrol there when I was a policeman. I patrolled there. I used to take right there to go to Misericordia hospital cases on the way. And that was a coincidence that I came from that neighborhood. When Frank Bender was dying from mesothelioma, pulmonary mesothelioma, because when he was in the Navy, he worked in the engine room with a spackle made up of asbestos. And he was dying. It was about a year or two before this happened. We used to have lunch. We're having lunch at the Oyster House on Hampton Street. And he says, Bill, I want to give you something. I said, you have to give me. I want to give you something to remember me. I said, I don't need anything to remember you by. I said, eat. Yeah, he could barely eat. I said, you know what, Frank? You know what you can do when you get up there to heaven? Find out who that boy is. If anybody can get a message back to me, it's you. He said, I'll do my best. And he passes away. Frank's full name was Francis Augustus Bender. Joseph Augustus Zarelli was the boy's name.
That's right.
The agent that worked on it, the officer, the detective, Tom Augustine, old derivative of Augustus. Now for the biggest kicker. Before the public knew who the parents were, even when they had the press conference and they named Joseph, who he was, they never disclosed who the parents were. Somehow it got leaked to the Inquirer, and a couple of days later, it was in the paper. I was calling the Dave Drysdale about setting up another ceremony with a new stone. And he says, you know, I saw in the newspaper that they identified the parents. I say, we're pretty sure that the father knew nothing about this child, even though he was on the birth certificate. The mother had him out of wedlock. Said, you know, it said in the paper she went to Dobbins. I said, yeah. So my father went to Dobbins. I went up and got his yearbook. She signed his yearbook. So here's a family that was so kind and generous in this whole reinterment and keeping the grave and giving a grave right at the beginning that was deeded never to be used for the America's unknown child. Who knows how well they knew each other, but she signed his yearbook. Dave Drysdale's father. Look at all those coincidences. Yeah, I don't want to get into quantum physics. That you don't have enough time for that. But the general consciousness in the world there's no accidents. There's no coincidences. Right. There's just this whole thing maybe was meant to be before it ever happened. That it would come to this beautiful salvation of this young child and having his name and the torment he went through. During the investigation, we determined that those cut-down scars, which they didn't know what it was because he was Rh positive in blood. And what they used to do when the child was Rh, they'd give him blood transfusions. His sister, who I met, his half-sister, she was born before him from the same mother. Didn't know the other Zarelli family at all. She didn't know she was adopted. She was adopted when her mother died, her father told her that he was adopted by a private adoption. So now we know. And she said that her mother had Rh positive, which would explain why the child, and she says she had a little bit of it, but she survived it. This lady, who's Joey's sister. So it's an amazing story.
It is.
And it was done. You said that it was done. I had a lot bring it. No, I had nothing to do with it. He did it. I'm pointing up. Collective intelligence of the police community did it. The scientists did it. The forensic genealogists did it.
Yeah, but you know what, Bill? Although you have all those pieces that kind of support, you have to have one person that kind of takes a hold of it and kind of massages it so that everybody else will join in. And that's what God did with you. He anointed you to bring everybody else together to get this done. And without you, none of this would have probably ever been accomplished. And I'm not saying that you did this, but you were the catalyst that brought everybody together that was able to make this happen. And your reward is going to be when you see that little boy, when you go on the other side, he's going to come up and give you a big hug.
Yeah. And, and he's going to say,
what took you so long?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thanks anyway, Bill.
My wife is Catholic. I'm Jewish. All right.
Doesn't matter.
Wait, listen to this. So we're going to look for our plots, cemetery plots, not far from us. And we go in and we're talking to the guy. And I said, can a Jewish person be buried in a Catholic? Because at one time it was, in a Catholic part of a cemetery. It was, those days are over, they said. I said, can a Catholic be buried in the Jewish section? Yep, not a problem. I said, do you have a non-sectarian section? This is true. I said, do you have a non-sectarian section? He said, yeah. Could you show us that? And he drives us out and shows us the plot. And I said, you sure this is non-sectarians? Yes. I said, there's no sectarians here. He said, no sectarians. I said, good. So I don't want to be buried in the Jewish spot. I don't want to be laying there for eternity hearing people complaining, that cheap son of a bitch, this is the coffin he bought for me? You call that a tombstone?
All right, we're getting back to the Catskills now all of a sudden.
Well, I used to do stand-up, you know that.
Undercover stand-up comedian, yeah.
Ship.
Bill, I was there, I think it was 2011. I think it was the anniversary of when the unknown boy was found. And I was at Ivy Hill Cemetery. And I think, was it Bill Kelly, the last remaining investigator, still alive?
Yes, Bill.
And we went to a luncheon afterwards. I think VDOC picked up the tab for the luncheon. And I sat next to him and his family. I remember meeting his daughter, and just a very, intelligent guy. He was older. He needed some help to get in and everything.
Sweetheart.
He was the last remaining original investigator to that case. And
continuous investigator.
I just felt that, a little connection there. So when I wrote my first book, I made sure to include a chapter about, I was like 4 years old when The Boy in the Box was shown on TV.
The same age as the boy.
That's right. A little bit older. Mommy, Daddy, why does that little boy look different? What's wrong with him? And where's his mommy and daddy? And they really couldn't answer it. Then, of course, 10 years later, because in Philly, every 10 years, 67, 77, the 10-year anniversary, 25-year, whatever it was, the Boy in the Box case. And if you're from anywhere near Philadelphia, and it eventually went nationwide, if not worldwide, it was a big story. Who is this boy? And we finally found out just about 2 years ago of the time we're doing this interview.
I want to say something else. On Susquehanna Avenue Road, where the boy was found, young Eagle Scout Nicholas Kirschbaum got one of these historical plaques and put it up there.
Yes.
Now that we know where he is and who he is, on January 13th of this year, which is a Monday, we're going to have a birthday celebration for him, and we're going to announce the Zarelli initiative from the VDOC Society, where we're going to help people with the DNA genealogy and get some of these other unknown children saved. It's identified, not saved.
So that's January 13th, 2025.
2025. It's a Monday. Another interesting thing. When we first reinterred him, the ceremony was supposed to start at 10 o'clock. There's a little chapel there, right at the entrance there. We're all in the chapel because it was pouring. And we had the chaplains from the police department, the Protestant, the Catholic, the imam, the rabbi. We had everybody there. And we were thinking we're going to have to do it inside. And a lot of people were there. All of a sudden, 5 minutes to 10, the rain stops, the sun comes out. And we're able to do the ceremony outside, which it was like, that was another little miracle from above. Who was it? Frank? Who was it? Tom August? Well, Tom was still alive. Who did that?
Yeah, that's great stuff.
It is great stuff. Bill, thank you so much for your time. Ray, any final things before?
No, thank you, Bill. Wow. I mean, I just thank you. What an amazing story. Our audience is going to be over the moon with you with this. This is just the stories in both episodes are just amazing. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. Thank you for allowing me to maybe in the first episode that I was on, give hope to young kids that think they're stupid. Give kids the secret is to find something in life, a path that you would do. My father said to me, I was always in trouble in school. Yeah. He said to me, I was about 14 years old. He said, I don't know what you're going to do in life. He said, but I got some advice for you. If you're going to be a ditch digger, be the best ditch digger you can be. But if you have half a brain in your head and then the thought bubble, which I got you figured for, you'll pick for a living what you would do for a hobby. Who's happier than a professional golfer? And I picked for a living what I would do for fun. So I never went to work a day in my life.
That's excellent work. And for the folks out there, the VDOC Society, you can't just call them up to work your case. You have to have a police agency, law enforcement agency, make the request to VDOC. But 9 times a year we meet. We take off the summer and actually December, but we meet over lunch at the Union League in Philadelphia. And then we fly in. It's all the cost of VDOC. We fly them in. Ray and I are full members. There are hundreds of other associate members. Bill, of course, is a commissioner emeritus. And
should I tell you what emeritus means?
Sure.
That's Latin for pay him no mind.
Well, I tell you what, is there a better way to wrap up than that?
No, there's not.
But pay this guy mind. He knows what he's talking about.
He does. Pay him mind as well. Yes.
Thank you for letting me.
Folks, again, thanks for listening or watching this episode of Cold Red. Follow us on social media, coldredpodcast.com. Like us, subscribe to us. Thanks to Rick Schelling for music, Matt Robinson and Matt McLaughlin, our producers. And remember, beware your surroundings. Stay safe. It just may save your life. Thanks, everybody. See you next time on Cold Red.